Morning all, and we've reached that part of the off season where I'm going to start cleaning up some playlists that already exist on the channel. I was looking through a couple of them this morning. This board I actually made up a couple of days ago. So I've had this one ready to go for a couple of days, and then I had other things I wanted to talk about instead. But the 2019 Stanley Cup finalists, the Boston Bruins. So there was a series that I ran, I want to say 3 years ago, which was just the finalists, and I went from 1981, which is when I started watching hockey all the way through until 2017. I added 2018 after, and now here we are, 2019. So in Boston's case, this was a team that going into the playoffs were seen as one of the favorites, and yet there were always doubts for me because 1988, 1990, and 2013, I had seen this team go to the Stanley Cup Finals and lose. In 2011, they'd won, but against a team I didn't want to see them beat, which was Vancouver. Now, the jersey I'm wearing does have the Stanley Cup Finals patch they wore in 2019 because I was very proud of the effort, even though if at the end they didn't end up winning it. So it starts against Toronto, and I feel bad because what we remember is, well, they won Game 7, right, but Game 1 is won by Toronto, 4-1 in Boston. And right out of the gate, Toronto looks better. And I thought they played better in this series than they had the previous year against Boston. Again, the end result would tell you they didn't, but there you go. Game 2, Boston wins 4-1 to tie the series, but Toronto won Game 3, 3-2, and went up to 2-1. And this would be the first of many times where Boston's kind of rowing against the current here. So Boston wins Game 4, sloppy Game 4, 6-4. It was an all over the place, lots of goals kind of game. And then in Game 5 in Boston, Toronto wins 2-1. Toronto was up 3-2 after winning in Boston. Game 5, Boston goes to Toronto and returns the favor and wins that one 4-2, leading us to, or Game 6, I should say, Boston wins 4-2, leading us to a Game 7 in Boston. And going into that game, I thought Toronto should win this. Because again, when you play a team that much, eventually things will start to even out at least a little bit. Unless you're Toronto and Ottawa in the early 2000s. That was less evened out than you might expect. And Toronto basically steamrolled Ottawa. But in Game 7, it was not close. Your final score is 5-1 for Boston. They moved on to the next round. But in round 2, they would find themselves against the Columbus Blue Jackets. And in Columbus, they were facing a team that had just swept the Tampa Bay Lightning. So Tampa loses relatively easily. Columbus has had some rest, and Boston's coming off of a 7-game series. So in Game 1, you kind of expect Boston to be tired. And yet, they win in overtime 3-2. But in Game 2, Columbus fights back. They beat Boston in double overtime 3-2. Game 3, that one's in Columbus. Columbus wins it 2-1. So again, Boston finds themselves down 2-1 here, 2-1 here, 3-2 here. And when their backs are against the wall, they come out very well. They win 4-1 against Columbus in Columbus in Game 4. Then they win Game 5 at home in Boston 4-3. And then they went to Columbus. And in what was a relatively worry-free game, they win 3-0. So, worthy of note as well is that in this run, anytime that Tuukka Rask has an iffy game to a bad game, people will jump on him. When he has a great game, not a lot is said. And it is the one thing that's gone on throughout Tuukka Rask's time as the starting goaltender for the Boston Bruins. And if at some point in time Boston had won a Stanley Cup with Tuukka Rask as the starter, I'm kind of convinced people would have said, they won it, but it wasn't really because Tuukka Rask was in that. He does not get the credit. So round 3, it's Carolina. Now, Carolina, of course, make it to conference finals. It's what they do. They didn't do it this year, but in general, if Carolina makes the playoffs, well, they're not going out in the first round. So, Boston, they don't really give Carolina much hope. They win 5-2 in Game 1, 6-2 in Game 2, and it's kind of a steamrolling. Now, Game 3 is close. This is the best chance Carolina has to potentially stop Boston. And Boston wins 2-1 in Carolina. Down 3-0. They're not going to come back in that. And in that series, I remember Boston getting Justin Williams off of this game. That Justin Williams seemed angry that whole series. So Boston wins 4-0 over a Carolina team that just did not have what was needed to answer the Boston Bruins. So we go to a Stanley Cup Finals against St. Louis. And, of course, this series was going to be hotly contested. There was, of course, the play where Torrey Krug, without a helmet, charges down the ice and throws a check, which Blues fans didn't like. There were also incidents that took place in this series on the Blues side that Bruins fans didn't like, and overall the series got, well, kind of ugly between the two fan bases at points, going to be honest, and maybe more so than what we saw in 2020 between Tampa and Dallas. I'll say a little bit worse. But anyways, Boston wins Game 1, 4-2. Boston had won Game 1 in every series except the Toronto series. Again, full credit to the Toronto Maple Leafs. Game 2, it goes to overtime. Overtime, not something that Boston was in a lot in these playoffs. St. Louis wins in Boston 3-2. And it was at this point where that dread kind of hits me. Like, oh, I've seen this before. Boston loses a game at home in the Stanley Cup final in overtime. I've seen this play before. I know how this works. So Game 3, Boston goes to St. Louis and wins 7-2. There was an interesting dynamic to that series. Boston would absolutely destroy St. Louis, and it felt like it gave maybe the team a little bit of an air of, okay, so we're going to win this, and all right, nothing to worry about. But in Game 4, St. Louis wins 4-2. Then in Game 5, St. Louis goes to Boston and wins 2-1. And there's controversies along the way. And again, a lot of these games feature some controversies, some that upset me as a Bruins fan. But in the end, the Blues end up winning the game. The Bruins don't come up with the victories. But in Game 6, Boston wins 5-1. So, Boston goes to St. Louis and wins 7-2. They win 5-1. They end up 2-1 in St. Louis. The difference is, St. Louis on the road, they're not worried about playing in Boston. Going into Game 7, they had won 2 out of 3 in Boston. So all they had to do is win 3 out of 4. But because of that 5-1 victory over St. Louis in Game 6, again, amongst fan bases, the belief was, well, St. Louis is on their way to choking away another series. St. Louis isn't very, they're not ready to be a champion. Boston's going to win it. And yet, there was that voice in the back of my mind saying, as a Bruins fan, I've seen this before, and this doesn't usually end well. So St. Louis ends up winning Game 7 by a final score of 4-1. But the Bruins, in that loss, had, in my eyes, again, made me proud that they got to a Game 7, because they were down 3-2 and they fought their way back before they succumbed, again at home, which makes it, I don't know, I mean, it's a bitter experience when you see a team hoist a Stanley Cup in a building that your favorite team plays in. It's not your favorite team doing it. But, St. Louis, again, full credit to them. They played very well, and it was kind of nice to see them win their first Stanley Cup. I just wish it hadn't been against the Bruins, but there you go. Now, scoring leaders amongst the 2019 Boston Bruins in those Stanley Cup playoffs. Marchand, 24 games, 9 goals, 14 assists, 23 points. One thing about Brad Marchand is he is a playoff performer. He is very good in the playoffs, and I know why people hate him. I know why people can't stand him. I know that there's a lot of people who can't stand the Bruins in general. I'll say Leaf fans, Columbus fans, Carolina fans, and St. Louis fans, just of the ones that played the Bruins that year. But Marchand is a good scorer, and there's going to be an interesting conversation to be had when his career ends about, does he belong in the, don't say it. Pastrnak, 9 goals, 10 assists in 24 games in those playoffs. Very good playoffs for Pastrnak. Krug, 2 goals, 16 assists, 18 points. The red asterisk, that's a player that's no longer on the Bruins as of the time I'm recording this. Bergeron, 9 goals, 8 assists that playoffs. Coyle, 9 goals, 7 assists. Krejci, 4 goals, 12 assists. DeBrusk, 4 goals, 7 assists. Johansson, 4 goals and 7 assists. Corrali, 4 goals, 6 assists. Grzelcyk had 4 goals and 4 assists. Nordstrom, 3 goals, 5 assists. McAvoy had 2 goals and 6 assists. And McAvoy is, at the stage, again, where I'm recording this, he is looking like he's going to be the guy that they're counting on going forward, as well as Grzelcyk to really lead the defense. Heinen, 2 goals, 6 assists. Of course, he's moved on to Anaheim. Chara, 2 goals, 4 assists. I didn't put an asterisk next to him because he hasn't moved on to another team officially yet. And I don't want to put an asterisk there in case he re-signs with Boston. Somebody goes, this isn't aging very well. Backes, 2 goals, 3 assists for him in 15 games. Famously with David Backes, he didn't play in every game in that finals against St. Louis. This was an indication that Backes' time in Boston was done. Because, honestly, if Backes isn't going to play against St. Louis, a team he'd be more motivated, you would think, to play against and beat than anybody else, then that's very telling about how Boston felt about his place in the lineup. Clifton, 2 goals, 3 assists. Achari, 2 goals and 2 assists in 19 games. And there was no indication from Achari of the goal scorer he was going to be in Florida the year after. Carlo, 2 goals, 2 assists. Carson Kuhlman only played 8 games, but he was a key guy. 1 goal, 2 assists. When he played well. Wagner, 12 games, 2 goals. Kampfer, 3 games, 1 goal. And Moore. Moore played 10 games, no points. The interesting thing with the Bruins, there were no missed games by their core key players. The Bruins didn't get hurt. We talk a lot about guys playing hurt, teams being banged up. Boston, yes, guys played hurt and they were banged up, but they didn't miss games. And so Boston didn't have that war of attrition working against them. So even though they go to 7 games here, they go to 6 games here, they go to 7 games here, they don't end up dealing with a lot of the injuries that other teams did. And sometimes just staying healthy plays a huge role in how far your team goes. Tuukka Rask played every single minute of those playoffs, ended up 15-9, .934 save percentage with 2 shutouts, and still at the end of the series, when St. Louis wins 5-4-1, you would think from some comments that Rask is a terrible goaltender, because that's kind of how that works. Some of it's Bruins fans, some of it isn't. Now during the regular season, Boston had 107 points, which was second overall in the NHL. 259 goals for, which was 11th. 215 goals against, which was fourth. And that was the 4th time that I watched them lose in a Stanley Cup final since I started watching hockey. 88, 90, 2013, and 2019. It's the great thing about being a Bruins fan is you've got a team that may very well go pretty far. The bad thing is, at some point it comes to an end. So when people started talking about Boston being spoiled and they did another championship, I was thinking, okay, now I get the Red Sox thing. I kind of get it from, I guess, the Celtics perspective. And of course, you've got the Patriots. But the Bruins are not a team that is awash in championships. Not over the last 4 decades. But, again, proud of that team. And it was a good time. So there you go. The 2019 finalists, the Boston Bruins. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And again, this is a fun playlist that I came up with because I was already doing videos on Stanley Cup champion rosters. And I thought, I want to talk about finalists too. So I'll be going through and seeing where I've missed on anything. And I'll be plugging teams into those spots. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.